Hey guys, what's up? Scott Clark with Scooter Media, and as you just saw in that opening intro sequence, the Canon R7 is capable of shooting some amazing cinematic video. And in today's video, I'm going to show you how to dial in the settings on your very own R7 so that you can get out there and shoot some amazing cinematic footage yourself. Let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is obviously turn on our camera and make sure we're in the video mode. And to do that, we just switch our dial on to the second option, which is our video camera. And following that, we want to make sure that our camera is in manual mode so we can really dial in all the settings that we want to the way we want to. And to do that, we're just going to turn the dial on the top to M, which is manual. And just to let you know, I did factory reset the camera, so all the settings that I did have in there have been wiped out. It's basically like it's coming from the store. And as we just saw here, my screen is about to go dim. So because we are shooting video, the first thing I'm going to do is going to go in and change that power saving mode so that our screen stays on. And to do that, we're going to go into our menu. You can scroll with these menus using the wheels and dials and all these things, and you can also touch on the screen to get where you need to go. So we're looking at the wrench and we're looking for page 3 and down to power saving. And the first option you see there is the screen dimmer, and we're going to disable that. That's also going to disable the screen off, and then I'm just going to change this auto power off to say 5 minutes or something for now, and that's it for that. And then we're going to go back to our first screen and our first page, or our first menu I should say, and first page. And the first option you're going to see in there is movie record size, and that is the first thing that we're going to change that's actually going to affect the video. So to change that, we're going to hit enter. And in here, you're going to see all of your options for your resolution as well as frame rate and compression. So on the top, we've got our resolution. And again, guys, we're trying to get it as cinematic as we possibly can. So we want this to look as clean and crispy as possible. So we're going to use the 4K fine, and that is downsampled from 7K, and it looks fantastic. So we're going to do 4K fine. We're going to come down to our frame rate. We're going to choose 23.98 or 24 frames per second. That is the most cinematic looking video. It's going to look more like a movie. And then the last option is our compression, and we only have 2 options in here, and that is IPB and IPB Lite. IPB Lite is just going to give you smaller file sizes, but the quality is going to be a little bit less. So in this case, we're going to stick with the regular IPB. And to settle those, we set OK. And then we're going to go, we don't need high frame rate or anything like that. We're not doing any kind of slow motion at this point in time. We'll leave the sound recording on auto. On the next page, we don't really have to worry about anything at this point in time. On page 3, white balance is something that we're definitely going to want to set. So we're going to press the set button. Now in here, you're going to see right now it's set to auto white balance. That is the first thing that we definitely want to change. We do not want to leave it on auto white balance, because if we do, as soon as we go out, it's just going to shift all over the place as soon as the white balance changes, which it will constantly. So what I would suggest doing, especially if you're new to this and not really sure how to use the white balance and how to change it, there are about 5 or 6 presets in there that you can use. So let's say you're out in a sunny day. The first option is daylight. If it's sunny out, you're just going to set it to that daylight option. Again, shady outside, you're going to set it to shade. Cloudy, again, pretty obvious settings in here. The tungsten light, that's going to be if you're in a room and you've got the overhead lights that are kind of the orangish color, you're going to want to use that. And the next option is your white fluorescent light. So obviously, if you're in a room with white fluorescent lights, you're going to want to use that option. The last option here is if you just really want to dial in your white balance and you know exactly what you want to set it to. And in today's case, my lights that I'm using are set to 5600 Kelvin. I'm going to set my white balance to 5600 Kelvin just to match the lights. So to do that, we just turn our dial, and when we hit 5600, we just hit enter to set that. Coming down here, we don't need custom white balance. We don't need this. We'll leave our picture style to auto. Canon Log Settings, we're going to want to change that. Shooting with the Canon Log is going to give you a very flat profile, or very flat image, and you are going to need to color correct and grade the footage afterwards. But for today's video, again, we're talking about the most cinematic looking video. And in order to get that out of your camera, you do need to use Canon Log. It's going to give you so much more dynamic range. You're going to be able to play with it in post and grade it and color correct it and just be able to do all kinds of things in post that you wouldn't be able to do shooting in the regular format. So we're going to go into our Canon Log. We're going to turn it on, C-Log 3. And when we do that, you'll notice there's a few more options show up below. So the first option is View Assist. And what the View Assist does is it basically puts a LUT on the image so that when you're looking at it in your camera, you're not seeing such a flat image. It still records that flat image, but it's just giving you a visual idea of what the footage might look like once you've color graded it. Characteristics, again, these are just dialing in the sharpness. If you want to adjust anything in there, you can. I just leave it as is. And color space, I generally use BT709 for the most part. Again, if you do really want to get the most cinematic footage, you can bump it down to the Cinema Gamut, and that will give you a much flatter profile even than the regular log. But it is a little bit harder to grade and harder to work with. But in this case, we did talk about making it the most cinematic, so I think using the Cinema Gamut is definitely going to give you the most cinematic footage. And I did use that to shoot all of the stuff in the intro at the beginning. And I believe, is there anything else in here that we need to turn on? Yes, the zebra settings. Now, the zebra settings is basically going to help you with your exposure. And what it does is once you bump up your exposure and it's overexposed, those zebra patterns are going to show up in the image in the overexposed areas. So it's very beneficial to use those to help expose your image. So we'll turn that on and we'll just leave it as is. And I will again show you guys what that looks like once we're out of the menus and stuff. Okay, shooting info display. We're going to come down here. And again, we've got one more thing we're going to put on, and that is our histogram. And right now it's already set to brightness and large, which is exactly what we want. But just to give you guys an idea of what the options are, it's RGB and brightness. We do want brightness. And display size, we want large just so it's easier to see on our screen. And again, I will show you that once we get out of the menu system. What we're gonna do now is just jump out of the menu system and onto our main display page, and there's a few options on there that we're gonna wanna change as well. So to do that, we're just gonna click menu, and now it's brought us to our main page. So as you can see, we've got our image, we've got how much time is left, and at the bottom here, we do have a few other images that we do wanna switch. The first one we want to switch is our shutter speed. And the shutter speed is always going to be double your frame rate. So in this case, we picked 24 frames per second. So our shutter speed needs to be 1/48, or in this case, our camera doesn't have 1/48. So the closest thing it does have is 1/50. So we're going to set it to 1/50. But just a general rule, if you were shooting in 30 frames per second, you want to switch your shutter speed to 1/60. If you're shooting in 60 frames per second, you want to double your shutter speed. In this case, it goes to 125, but there is no 120. But again, you just want to make sure that your shutter speed is double whatever your frame rate is or as close to it as possible. So we're going to go in here and we're going to set that to 1/50. The next option we have is our aperture. And again, when we're talking about shooting cinematic footage, we basically want that aperture to be as low as possible or to be wide open as possible. So in this case, our aperture goes down to 1.4. So as you can see, we talked about our zebras. Now by bringing our aperture down to 1.4, our image right now is overexposed, and that's why we're seeing those zebra patterns. We can also, if we go in here and hit our info, once we see that it's brought up our audio, and if we hit it again, we can now see we've got our histogram, and that's also going to help us with exposing our image. So if we go back in here, and let's put it back to, where was it, 5.6. You can see our histogram here is kind of all over to the left. It's showing us that it's a little bit dark, it's a little underexposed. So by changing our aperture and going down to 1.4, which is as low as it'll go, You can see now our histogram's over to the right, and it's showing us that we're a little overexposed now. We want to see that sitting right in the middle of that histogram. But for now, we'll leave it as is. The next option on the bottom there is our exposure compensation. We're not going to worry about that for right now. And the following option on the bottom there is our ISO, and we do need to switch that. And what you're going to want to know about your camera is the base ISO setting. So for the Canon R7, when shooting not in log and just a regular standard picture profile, the base ISO is 100. When we are shooting in C-Log 3, that base ISO jumps up to 800. And what that means is that we set it to 800. That's going to give us the cleanest image possible at that setting. So we're going to go in here. We're going to go up to 800. And we're going to set that at 800. All right, guys, that's pretty much it for dialing in the settings. We've got everything set up as we need. Our camera is basically ready to go, but looking at the image, you can definitely see that we're overexposed. If we wanted to, we could go in here and bump up our aperture to change the exposure, but really we don't want to do that. We could go in here and turn down our ISO to adjust the exposure, but again, we don't want to do that either because then it's not going to give us the cleanest image. So what do we do in order to adjust our exposure with all of these settings dialed in? Well, we just need to add an ND filter to the end of our camera, and that's it. So I'm going to do that now just to kind of show you guys how this works. But this is how to keep everything cinematic. So we're just going to screw this on to the front of the camera. Just like that. Okay, we do have our ND filter on the front of our camera, and it is a variable ND. So by turning the dial here, you can see that it's changing the exposure. So as you can see now, we can dial in our exposure using our ND filter, and it doesn't affect any of our settings. So our base ISO stays the same, our shutter speed stays the same, our aperture is as low as it can be to give us that most cinematic, shallow depth of field. So this is how I would shoot this image, and as you can see, there are still a few zebras in our image, but you don't need to get rid of all the zebras. Any kind of white area or brighter area is going to still be a little bit overexposed, and that's okay. You just want to make sure that the face, or whatever the most important thing is that you are shooting and want to see, is not overexposed and doesn't have the zebras all over that. So we'll just hit record on that. All right, guys, that's pretty much it. We've got everything dialed in as we need it. We've gone in, we've turned off our power saving mode so that the screen doesn't go dim on us. We've changed our movie record size to 4K fine, which is the best quality image that you're gonna get. We've set our frame size to 24 frames, which is gonna give you the most cinematic looking image. We've gone in and we've turned on our zebras, we've turned on our histogram, we've changed our shutter speed to be double what the frame rate was. We've turned our aperture down to its lowest number, or as wide open as it can possibly go, and in this case it's 1.4. And we've put our ISO to the base ISO when shooting in C-Log 3, which is 800. And those are all the settings that you guys are gonna need to go out and shoot some great quality cinematic footage. I really hope you guys found value in today's video, and if you did, please shoot me a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing, as it really does make a difference, and I'd love to have you join me on this YouTube journey. Also hit that notification bell to stay up to date with everything coming out on this channel. I recently released a video reviewing the video capabilities of the Canon R7. If you're interested in checking that video, please click on the link right here. Thanks for watching today's video. I really do appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one.